There are many alternate universe versions of Invincible, ones that went through radically different origins and had different life experiences, ones that ultimately shaped them into characters very different from the one we know. With the introduction of the multiverse in Invincible, however, it gives readers room to begin envisioning their own unique takes on the character, ones that could possibly exist within the wider multiverse. GDA Mark is one of the most popular fan-made versions of this character. What makes GDA Mark special is that many people online are constantly adding to and tweaking elements of this version's lore, turning him into a hodgepodge of various ideas. However, the original skeleton of the character, I believe, can be traced back to TikTok accounts Sir Sack Ballington and Revan.exe, who established the general lore and design of GDA Mark that many people now spin off from. So who exactly is GDA Mark, and what makes his story so different from his mainline counterpart?
Earth is not for you to conquer, Viltrumite.
Our story begins very similarly to the Invincible timeline. Nolan is sent to Earth to prepare it for the Viltrumite invasion. He marries Debbie, grows very fond of her, and has a child with her, Mark Grayson. However, the shift really begins in Mark's early childhood. For whatever reason, Mark's powers begin to manifest at a much earlier age in comparison to his teenage years like in the mainline timeline. At some point, Nolan feels he's ready to conquer Earth and begins by severely injuring Debbie, perhaps even trying to kill her, something that Mark witnesses when he comes home from school. Nolan is clearly disgusted and shocked with himself, especially when he sees the look on Mark's face. He flies off the planet out of guilt. Now this does raise some questions for me. The fact that Nolan looks so shocked by what he had done means that hurting Debbie wasn't something he did with a clear mind. Perhaps he tried to tell Debbie on what he truly came to Earth to do, and her resulting emotional outburst caused him to lash out to a severe degree, leaving him with deep regret for what he had done. Anyways, Debbie doesn't die here. Instead, she ends up in a coma and is watched over by the GDA, who also taken Mark at a very young age, preparing him to become a weapon for the United States government. Sir Sack Ballington establishes some very early lore about GDA Mark. In one video, we see that Mark was trained at a very young age, engaging in various feats of strength training. In this video, Mark lifts up a gigantic ship, probably to test his strength. We can assume that Cecil is the one that tells him to put it down. However, Mark continues to hold it up. From this, we can assume that in this universe, Mark feels an increasing need to prove his own strength. He's way too eager to get stronger, to the point where he pushes himself beyond what is necessary. That boiling anger inside him, the anger surrounding the betrayal of his father, is heightened because Mark is so young this time around. He's experiencing emotional turmoil to a much greater extent than he did if the betrayal had happened later in his life. In this way, you can say that Mark ending up with the GDA is the best thing that could have possibly happened. At this point in his life, there is nobody else who can harness and channel Mark's anger into something practical that wouldn't result in him going down a dark path. However, we do run into questions about the morality of what the GDA is doing to Mark. Sure, it's good that he has some kind of support system, but this support system is literally the shady government on steroids. Based on lore details, it seems Mark underwent multiple surgeries as a child to augment his body with cybernetics. This leads to details like Mark towering over others at 7 feet tall. Well, this isn't really definitive, as Sir Sack Ballington says that it's up to our interpretation. The real range is between 6 to 9 feet. Regardless, Mark is a towering specimen of a man, much taller than his main universe counterpart. Despite the GDA offering Mark a mechanism to let out his anger, they aren't doing it with his best interest in mind. At the end of the day, Mark is seen as a weapon the GDA can utilize, something to experiment on, test, and weaponize against the threats on Earth. This inhumane treatment is only counteracted by Cecil's love for Mark. Cecil is the closest thing to a father he has, strict and sometimes distant, but still showing Mark the care and affection he needs at this point in his life. Cecil's influence on Mark is pretty apparent, shown by how Mark's personality is a lot more calm, level-headed, and focused compared to his main universe counterpart. As a Viltrumite, Mark possesses many of the traits of the race, including super strength, flight, super speed, and an increase in strength granted by anger. The strength of GDA Mark varies greatly depending on the source you're looking at. Some fans glaze GDA Mark as the strongest incarnation of Invincible ever made, capable of defeating Nolan and Conquest with ease, and even overpowering Thrag in some instances. Other versions are strong, clearly stronger than most of Viltrumites, but can still struggle with characters like Conquest. The strength of GDA Mark primarily comes from his battle training with the GDA at a young age. They would have put Mark through the traditional, intense training GDA soldiers go through, but to a much more extreme degree, considering that Mark has superhuman abilities. This would include endurance training, strength training, cardio, and likely multiple forms of intelligence tests to develop Mark's tactical skill and emotional control. He would most likely learn various combat styles and martial arts to ensure he can win in any kind of combat encounter. Couple this with the physical and cybernetic augmentations he was given, and it's clear that GDA Mark is definitely a lot stronger than most traditional Viltrumites. There's a video where we see Mark encountering Conquest for the first time, and it's here where you see just how different the atmosphere is for GDA Mark. There's a sense of precision from him that's almost terrifying. When Nolan returns to Earth to seek their cooperation, Mark is able to overpower Nolan for a brief period. There's no doubt then that Mark can beat Nolan in a fight if it came down to one. GDA Mark is strong, but he's also a rational person. He is not prone to anger like most Viltrumites, and he doesn't have their pride either. He's willing to utilize the firepower and resources of the GDA to win no matter what. He wouldn't exactly give the courtesy of a one-to-one battle with someone from Viltrum. If it's much more efficient to jump them with the GDA, he'll do it. In the vast Invincible multiverse, GDA Mark proves that even the smallest change in a character's origin can create something completely new and terrifyingly effective.